Welcome to the Dorky Readings and Bloopers, featuring Blood Phoenix Rebirth, first book of the Broken World series. Chapter 8. I woke in James's little black convertible. A light mist slipped over my cheeks and forehead. The street lamps popped into view above me, one by one, as if someone hit me on the head. James drove with apprehension, tugging his features. He hadn't indicated he knew I'd woken until he spoke. You all right? Perfect. The heavy sarcasm in my voice made me flinch. What happened? What do you think happened? I killed someone else. Someone perfectly nice, not a fucktard. Now, how I got in your car? I figure you had something to do with that, because everything else is a big old blank for me. His hand slid down the steering wheel, but he didn't take his gaze off the road. Since I am the one that saved your ass, let's get something clear. No more screaming. No more leaving victims to be disposed of with holes in their necks. No more of anything that can lead someone back to you. You hear me? Oh yes, mighty sultan of my inexperience, do give me the lashings I deserve. A heavy weight sat on my heart. Why did James have to be such a bastard? He pulled up to a red light. Don't you understand what will happen if humans find out about us? Why do you think we kill when we eat? He pulled away from the light, and he spoke again, so that things like this don't happen. But it's my fault you don't know how to close up the wounds. That's my bad. I should have taught you how to deal with all of this before I let you feed. Usually, we teach noobs about this before they are changed. Wait. What? Taught, as in like a class taught? As in training, like boot camp. Oh my god, you are not serious. Boot camp for vamps? This is like a bad sitcom waiting to happen. I'm afraid so. And more like a B-rated slasher flick than a sitcom. We're really not that funny. Something clicked. He told me that he worked in public relations, the face of the vampire public, the one who interacted the most with the humans. You recruit humans to become vampires, don't you? Don't be silly. I decide whether or not the humans are allowed to become vampires, and then I introduce them into our world once I've decided. The amount of research, planning, and evaluation involved with the process is extensive. It'd be idiotic of me to reveal myself during recruitment. And what happens if you decide they're not going to become a vampire? What do you think happens? Coldness swept over me. My vision unfocused and refocused at random. People walked the streets of Manhattan in small groups, moving from bar to bar. Eventually, every one of them would die for some reason or another. But how many of them were going to die because of vampires? How many vampires existed? How many people made up a normal vampire's diet, and most importantly, how many people were going to die because of me? I pulled my knees up to my chest, put my cheek to them, and looked out the window. Images flashed behind my eyes, registering with my brain, but I lost the flow of continuum. Friends laughing, hanging on each other for balance, happy. I missed Ari like crazy, and I needed to get a hold of her somehow. I'd have to call our neighbor, Mrs. Duggar, at the bagel shop or the supermarket. Not likely I had her work numbers in the bags James packed for me. I could never remember her work numbers, and since we couldn't afford cell phones, I'd have to rely on Mrs. Duggar. We pulled onto a highway shortly after my silent declaration. I sank forward against the seatbelt with my head between my knees and the toes of my shoes dangling over the edge of the seat. Soon, James parked between two large green dumpsters behind a line of tall buildings. They both smelled of rot. I really hoped we weren't here to dump a body. Mike's body. What are we doing here? Come on, Rhea. You're a vampire now. You have an eidetic memory, and I've just told you, James said. I'm sorry. I've just had my fourth traumatic experience in the last 48 hours. So either be nice to me, or shut up. James's features grew stern and angry before he softened, and he reached his hand out to touch me. Pleasant images encompassed my vision, and I looked into those golden eyes. We both sighed in one big movement, and I welcomed any comfort he may give me, but James took his hand back. Get out and take off your shoes and socks, James said. What? If I'm going to have to repeat myself all the time, I would become a far more unbearable teacher. Bare feet, get to it. He snapped his fingers twice and laid his loafers on the car floor with his black dress socks rolled inside of each. I tossed my shoes and socks on the floor seconds later and stood barefoot on the wet pavement. Now what, Professor? He motioned for me to follow him between two of the buildings. Miniature electric torches dotted the narrow alley. A few empty bottles and pop cans littered the ground, immersed in a mosaic of cigarette butts. My hands grazed the brick on either side of me, and wet pebbles slipped up between my toes as I enjoyed the sway of James's walk. He stopped between two lights, deep in shadow. James appeared in sharp contrast, speckled in the reds of his body heat, thanks to my new and improved vamp vision. Ready? He placed his fingers on the groups between the bricks and lifted himself off the ground. Using nothing but his toes and fingers, James climbed the side of the building and stopped a story above me. Coming? How? Stammering, I ran my hands over the side of the building. How do you think? Stoker did get some things right. I gripped the spaces between the bricks and pulled myself off the pavement. My God, I could scale the side of the building like Dracula. How is that possible? I followed him up the rest of the 8 stories, moving slow, not wanting to make a mistake and fall. Pulling myself onto the roof, I collapsed on the hard concrete, breathing hard. James laughed as I scrambled back from the edge. So not funny, I said. The fear wouldn't quit. What on earth are you scared of? Falling? Even if you had fallen, it's not like you would have been hurt. He extended his hand to me. Right. I took it, and he helped me up. You'll get used to it all eventually. James wrapped me up in his arms. Sighing, I leaned into him and gave up, the fight in me gone for the night. The mixing smells of James's strawberry-scented skin and oiled leather of his jacket threatened to put me to sleep. Who knew being a vampire could be so damned exhausting? My body screamed that his queen, his lover, didn't matter. An odd piece of me had claimed him. Unfortunately for both James and the woman he called Bianca, my head couldn't latch onto the concept and accept it as valid, but whatever let me see Bianca's memories pushed away the images of Mike's death. They started slow and gentle. The first time he and Bianca held hands, James's nerves made him jittery. He walked so close together that our shoulders touched, and his knuckles grazed across mine with each step. A river bent next to us with white and purple wildflowers in tall patches. Neither of us spoke. He almost slid his hand over mine twice, but pulled away at the last second. I pushed my fingers between his. Unable to look at me, he blushed and grinned. The first time James introduced Bianca to his mother as someone other than Savi's daughter or the girl from the river. Mother, he said, I want you to meet Bianca. His mother briefly turned from her vegetables. Well, yes, of course, I've already met Bianca. Alex, you know that. We meet with Savi every 7th day by the river to scrub our things. No, Mother, I want you to meet my Bianca. I shuffled my feet, gripped his hand harder, and the burning normally contained within my cheeks spread down to my neck. Kaliana James stopped again and looked at me more closely. Her eyes were mirror images of James's, so dark brown they were almost black, but a warm, soft, and kind black. Her lips curled into a pleasant and friendly smile. Well, of course. Hello, Bianca. Forgive me for not noticing what a beautiful young woman you have become. Come here. Kaliana beckoned me to her side. I let go of James's hand and approached her. She placed her strong, warm hand over my cheek and spoke to me in soft tones. I'm very glad my son has chosen you, and you him. My heart wanted to break from the swirling mixture of joy and sorrow. Another memory flashed. I wore a long tan dress made of a single cloth. It twisted around my neck and under my arms. James brushed a few curls away and dropped his hand over my bare skin. Goosebumps blossomed in a few covered places. In reality, I dug my nails into the back of his leather jacket as he mimicked the memory. A familiar warmth balled up in my lower abdomen, and my body tensed against James's. He sent another image. We were a few years older, barely teenagers and recently married. His mother was out of the river with Savi, Bianca's mother, leaving us alone in the small house. Our bed of feathers lay in the corner of the room, but James had me pressed against the table, my blue dress bunched around my naked hips. Our mouths mingled with furious urgency. I held on to him with all of my delicate strength. Pushing James away, my body ached with warmth and wanting. I backed to the opposite edge of the roof. The more distance spread between us, the safer I was from another onslaught of intimacy. I'm getting down. I stepped backwards off the edge, caught the lip of the roof, and climbed down to the wet pavement. Fear and adrenaline pushed away the sensual feelings, at least until James landed beside me with a predatory look in his eyes. He stood, and my knees went to rubber. James trapped me between him and the brick. The brick would have been easier to go through. I wanted to disappear. Do I still make you uncomfortable, Rhea? I tried to swallow past the dryness at the back of my throat and tasted blood. My fangs threatened to drop. I nodded. He reached beneath his jacket and pulled out a gun. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. Too weird. It's taken. Stock much?